Come see us on tour in Los Angeles, Honolulu, Dallas, Texas, Baltimore, Atlantic City, Cohoes, New York, and Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and only there. Okay, we have special guests with us. Max Blumenthal, award-winning journalist, as well as the editor-in-chief and founder of the independent investigative news website, The Gray Zone. He's also best-selling author of several books, including Goliath, The 51-Day War, and The Management of Savagery. Welcome back to the show, Max Blumenthal. Hey, Max.
Good to see you, and thanks to you and Steph for the nice holiday card we just got.
Oh, I'm glad you liked it. Now, are you going to be part of the shows in Baltimore?
Yeah, I heard something about this, but
when are we in Baltimore?
I can't remember when they are.
March 14th
and 15th.
All right, I should have some material ready by then.
Okay, and I just got to say, I really love the jacket you have on. It really makes your eyes dance.
Thank you.
Okay.
The eyes are the window to the soul.
That's right. So I brought you on because you tweeted this out, how they're what they call balkanizing, which means they're splitting up Syria. And, usually when there's a civil war, the winning side takes over the country. That's not what's happening. They're breaking it up. Thanks to Syria's liberation, the plan for its balkanization and recolonization is well underway. So basically, Israel is Yoko Ono and Syria is the Beatles, just so you know, okay? And this is how they're breaking it up. So this part, this is called lost regime territory. What does that mean, Max? Do you want to explain this map at all?
Yeah. It's hard to actually decipher it because it's a Bloomberg map, so they're not giving you the full picture. Syria's large parts of Syria are militarily occupied by invading forces, by Turkey to the north. They using their proxy forces, by the U.S., which is in pink, east of the Euphrates River. That's where the oil fields and gas fields in Syria are that fed its economy. It's also where its richest soil is. And so that's where the breadbasket of Syria is. It's as if a foreign country, like some powerful foreign power, was occupying Nebraska and Kansas and then telling us, no, you can't have your corn. What would that do to the U.S. economy? So there was a food crisis.
And that's right here, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they irrigate through the Euphrates River. And Syria has been under sanctions since the Dirty War. Well, let's go back. We can go back to 2011, 2012. A dirty war on Syria began after there were some protests calling for political reforms. The U.S., Turkey, NATO, the Gulf states, they dumped in billions of dollars of weapons into so-called opposition groups, which were led by the Al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria called Jabhat al-Nusra. And Turkey was the main backer, but the U.S. was pumping in something like $13 billion over the whole period. And the whole point was to break Syria up, and Israel was sitting back, not necessarily sitting back, they were actually participating, but not as openly as the other states were. And it was a divide and conquer strategy. Take as much of Syria's resources as possible and divide and weaken it so it can't contest Israel, which was already occupying the Syrian Golan. And Syria was really the last Arab state after Iraq was toppled and Libya were toppled that still supported Palestinian resistance. So they wanted to weaken that as well, destroy its alliance with Iran. Iran was using Syria to send supplies and weapons to its ally in Lebanon, Hezbollah, which was defending Lebanon against Israel. So this gives you an idea of why they wanted to balkanize it. And now this is the product that we have today after the collapse of the Syrian government, which since the end of that dirty war was under the most ruthless sanctions regime in the world and was simply unable to trade in dollars. It was cut off from the world economy. It couldn't pay for irrigation equipment. It was so most of the population was falling below the poverty line. The Syrian lira was worthless. And so it was only a matter of time, actually. And now what took place is the U.S. had been occupying the northeast of Syria, that pink area, which had starved its economy. It said it was there to defeat ISIS, but it's really there just to defeat Syria and to take on Iran, the two real enemies of ISIS. Then if you move to the left of
so
that,
let me just say, so when they asked Trump, why are you leaving troops in Syria? He was leaving them here, and this is where they make the food and have the oil.
Yeah, and Trump tried to pull them out, and the Joint Chiefs, the generals, just said no. And the CIA said no, and they started accusing Trump even more intensely of being a Russian puppet. Then after Assad fell, Trump said, we have no business in Syria. And that's when the Pentagon announced that they didn't just have 900 troops there, they have 2,000. And those troops are working hand in glove with something called the Syrian Democratic Forces, which are just a Kurdish group that was named that by a general. And so the Kurds are the U.S. proxy forces there. It's all about keeping Syria divided and weakened. And then if you look at that kind of greenish, or is it turquoise, or what would you call it? Taupe? I don't know what the color. That and the one to the left, even further. That's it. Yeah.
That's Turkey.
That's what Turkey has cut into Kurdish territory there and slaughtered a lot of Kurds in the process. Then if you move further left.
So the United States and the Kurds are here. This is Turkey. This is how we're splitting up Syria.
Yeah. And it says SNA, Turkish-backed SNA. That's the Syrian National Army. But what it really is it's the refuse of the jihadist groups that the CIA and NATO and the Gulf states like Qatar were supporting. Saudi Arabia were supporting them. And Turkey just adopted them as mercenaries, and they've called it the Syrian National Army, but it's basically Turkish mercenaries. Don't exactly have the best interests of Syria in mind. And then purple,
and this is Al-Qaeda. It's called HTS.
That's Al-Qaeda.
This is Al-Qaeda. They have the capital, which is Damascus. They have homes. And this is all run by Al-Qaeda, people who attacked us on 9/11 and that we're funding and in bed with. Go ahead.
So this was originally they just held on to a province called Idlib. They took it in 2015, and this was a coalition called Jabhat Fatah al-Sham, but was really a cover for Al-Qaeda. And the most powerful group, as I mentioned, was Jabhat al-Nusra. That's the local Al-Qaeda group, headed by someone known as Mohammed al-Jolani, who is now the ruler of Syria, although no one elected him. And they had this little province, and that in that province, they kicked out all the Christians at gunpoint, gave many of their homes to Uyghur Muslims from Western China who had been brought in through Turkey by Erdogan to set up their little colony, their little Islamist colony there. They kicked out the Druze population, another religious minority, at gunpoint, some of them were forced to convert or be killed. It was a spectacle of theocracy. Women were executed for adultery. A little kind of Saudi Wahhabi theocracy was set up in a NATO carve-out of it, the most secular state, not just in the Arab world, but the most secular state in the Middle East, a more secular state and more pluralistic than Israel. I'm referring to Syria under the Assad government. And so as this government was collapsing, the military's getting paid the soldiers get like $7 a week at most. They're just on their last legs. This group called HTS, which is the rebranding of Al-Qaeda, which was getting clear NATO support, storms into Aleppo, the northernmost city in Syria that's a major population center, and just takes it without a fight. And then they keep moving south through Homs, which you see there, all the way to Damascus. The Syrian army melts away, and they are now in power. HTS, which we're told is former Al-Qaeda.
They're Al-Qaeda.
Mohammed al-Jolani is the leader. He puts on a 3-piece suit when he used to wear fatigues. He actually this is someone, if we want to talk about Jolani, who emerged out of the U.S. prison in Iraq for Al-Qaeda members of Al-Qaeda in Mesopotamia during the Iraq insurgency. He left there in 2004. There were rumors that he was actually recruited by the Americans at that point, and starts trying to prepare the insurgency in Syria. And Jolani just appointed as his intelligence chief. This is the intelligence chief of Syria, who's going to meet with all the foreign intelligence chiefs and deal with the CIA and Brussels and everyone else, NATO. He was the key figure importing weapons from Al-Qaeda in Mesopotamia and Iraq into Syria. He was one of Al-Qaeda's key figures in the Middle East, and is sanctioned by almost every NATO state and the United Nations, personally sanctioned, and he's now the intelligence chief. It's just Al-Qaeda in three-piece suits, and they control that purple area. And it's the perfect scenario for all of the imperialist powers, because Iran and Russia have now been the most powerful allies of Syria, have been forced to leave. Russia has 2 military bases on the Syrian coast, which are in that kind of yellowish area.
Over here.
And it looks like they may lose them and have to move to Libya as part of a deal with Turkey and the US. And then Iran has completely left because they didn't want to lose thousands more men after this giant confrontation with Israel that they've been having, defending an army that doesn't want to fight. So they've left, and without any alliances, and with an Al-Qaeda government in power that can't possibly put up a fight, whose main enemy is other Syrians, Israel storms in, which you can see at the bottom is where it says Israeli troops edged further, this is such a euphemism, into the Golan Heights and continue to operate in southern Syrian towns.
The Golan Heights, which they illegally occupy with the blessing.
Israel's taken 450 kilometers of new Syrian territory, including Mount Hermon, which is the highest point in Syria. It's so high that right now it's blanketed in snow and you can ski on it, which gives Israel the perfect vantage point to attack the rest of Syria. You can see into Damascus from Mount Hermon. Israel now has that. They violated the UN plan that prevented Israel from going into Syria. Greater Israel has expanded massively. They've brought like fanatical religious nationalist rabbis to bless the new land. They're talking about building new colonies there. And the new government in Syria didn't even fire a single bullet against them. And Israel's moving deeper and deeper into Syria as the U.S. is retrenching its presence, and Turkey is taking more territory in the north. So it's basically a divided, weakened, balkanized state that is being recolonized because, as we know, Syria, prior to its independence, was a colony of the same imperialist powers that are now dividing it up.
So you got Israel taking over there. You got Al-Qaeda in the purple. You got Turkey up here. You got the United States and the Kurds over here.
Yep.
And we don't know exactly who's controlling the yellow part, but I'm going to guess Israel and the United States. And
a perfect breeding ground for the resurgence of ISIS and whatever Al-Qaeda wants to do to Europe or to Lebanon.
That's right. You got to remember, ISIS is Israel, and Al-Qaeda is the United States. That's what I say. Would you agree with that?
I mean, this is the thesis of my book, The Management of Savagery, is that the U.S. has always used these forces to attack its geopolitical foes, and then when the blowback comes in the form of something like 9/11, for example, the U.S. then represses its own population and announces a so-called war on terror to de-democratize the country in favor of the national security state. And so we're seeing the continuation and acceleration of that process. There's no way instability is not going to flow out of Syria. And if you pay close attention to what's happening in Syria right now, religious minorities are being slaughtered. On the west coast of Latakia, Alawites are being slaughtered. The shrines of their holiest teachers, sheikhs, are being vandalized, and there are revenge killings where anyone who is accused of being part of the security apparatus of the former government are just being killed in extrajudicial fashion in the streets, often on camera, shot in the head. Others are being humiliated on camera, and they are out in the streets protesting. And HTS is bringing in their goon squads and firing at these protesters, or firing in the air. Christians are out in the streets of Damascus protesting because we've seen large Christmas tree displays be burned down, not by Syrian members of the new HTS government, but by foreign fighters, foreign fanatics who think that Syria isn't even really a country for its people, it's Islamic land. Uyghurs are burning down Christmas trees, and so Christians are out protesting. We don't know how that will turn out, but it's a horrible scenario. And finally, this new government is being welcomed by the United States and London. They're meeting openly with British Foreign Office officials. The UK's top Middle East Foreign Office official had a friendly, open meeting with Mohammed al-Jolani. Same with the Barbara Leaf from the State Department. Met with Jolani and said she had a fruitful meeting. And the next thing she did is remove a $10 million bounty from his head. Why? Here's why. It's very simple. Jolani said he will be their puppet and he will not resist the U.S. or Israeli occupation of Syria as long as he can establish his Sunni supremacist sectarian rule and commit awful atrocities and reestablish Gulag archipelago across Syria for his own purposes. The U.S. and UK and the West are fine to sit back and watch because all they care about is protecting Israel and protecting their own occupation and their own theft of Syria's oil.
So here's one more. 454 kilometers seized in 2 weeks. Quite the pace, Israel. A few people in Moscow may be wondering, what's the secret to avoiding sanctions while expanding territory? What's the secret? Why isn't Israel being sanctioned? They're expanding their...
Right.
Well, I don't know. Maybe if you had videotapes of people doing things that they weren't supposed to be doing, like the Mossad does. So they have seized 454 kilometers of Syrian territory, advancing since the fall of Assad. Israel's captured... Look at this. This is in the last 5 days. So... this is all... Again, the terrorists... are the United States and Israel. And every war that has happened from Iraq to Libya to Syria to Ukraine has been because of Israel and the United States. Certainly Afghanistan. And now we're helping, again, we're bombing Yemen again. Come see us on tour in Los Angeles, Honolulu, Dallas, Texas, Baltimore, Atlantic City, Cohoes, New York, and Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and only there.